The genesis of this book really began with one big general question, which was, how did we in the United States inherit this particular kind of media system? A media system that in many sectors is dominated by a handful of corporations. As I dug deeper into the archives, many of the answers seem to trace back to policy debates in the 1940s, policy battles, really. Even though the New Deal was in retreat throughout much of the U.S. government as the political landscape was shifting dramatically to the right, you still had the New Deal's last stand at the Federal Communications Commission, particularly with people like Larry Fly and Clifford Durr, who were still trying to advance a New Deal vision of what the media system in the United States should look like. Even though much of the landscape had shifted, you saw a lot of progressive initiatives come forth from the FCC in particular, and there was a vibrant media reform movement at this time in the mid to late 1940s. I think it's safe to say that if these initiatives, if these media policy, media reform efforts had been successful, our media system would look very different today. And to give one example, what was called the FCC Blue Book was the Federal Communication Commission's first serious attempt to define the public interest principle in terms of meaningful public service requirements that broadcasters had to satisfy in order to keep their licenses. If broadcasters did not do things like devote a certain amount of programming to public affairs, local culture, educational content, then this would trigger public hearings and presumably their licenses would be revoked, which is an almost unthinkable act today. Needless to say, the Blue Book was not successful, largely because of an industry backlash that equated these regulations, these guidelines, with essentially a communist plot. And through red baiting, many of the reformers were ultimately chased out of Washington, D.C. It's true that my book often paints an overall bleak picture of America's media system. It levels a fairly damning structural critique of what's become the United States media landscape. However, I do think that ultimately it's a hopeful narrative. Both historically and today, my book shows that there was and is vibrant media activism happening all around us. There's a constant media reform movement, sometimes more visible than at other times. But I think that if history teaches us anything, it's that if social movements force government to intervene on the public's behalf, then true democratization can occur.